She said, "I'll have your baby." What the rancher did next shocked everyone. Witness this unbelievable, true inspired story right here on Whisper of the Past. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Let's get started. The land stretched endlessly across the horizon, a sea of dust and golden grass that shimmered under the burning sun. Texas, in the late 1800s, was a place both beautiful and cruel, where a man's worth was measured by the calluses on his hands and the grit in his soul. Ranch life was no easy path. It demanded sweat, sacrifice, and a heart tough enough to withstand both the land and its loneliness. For Ethan Carter, a rancher in his mid-30s, this life was all he knew. His ranch, modest yet sprawling, was the last remnant of a family legacy left to him after tragedy had stripped everything else away. Ethan wasn't always a man of silence. Once he had been hopeful, married to a woman he cherished, dreaming of raising children who would ride the plains by his side. But fate had been merciless. His wife, Anna, had died giving birth to their first child, who also never drew breath. In one night, Ethan lost the family he had prayed for, and with it, he lost his faith in love. He poured himself into the ranch, letting the weight of cattle, horses, and endless chores bury the pain he refused to face. The town of Clearwater, just a few miles away, knew him as a man who spoke little, kept to himself, and carried shadows in his eyes. While other ranchers gathered at the saloon, laughing over whiskey and cards, Ethan preferred the solitude of the land. The town's women whispered that no woman could ever soften him again. That was true, until Clara Dawson arrived. Clara was unlike anyone Ethan had ever known. She came from St. Louis, a young woman of 23 with refined features, soft brown hair, and a spirit that seemed both fragile and unbreakable at once. She was the daughter of a wealthy banker, raised in silks and taught the ways of high society, but she did not want the life carved out for her. Her father had arranged her marriage to a man she did not love, a union that would benefit business, not her heart. On a stormy night, desperate to escape, Clara fled westward, riding stagecoaches until the money she carried ran dry. By fate, she found herself in Clearwater, drenched in rain, standing at the gate of Ethan Carter's ranch. Ethan had no intention of sheltering her. He told her to move on, that his ranch was no place for a city girl with delicate hands. But Clara, stubborn and determined, refused to leave. She cooked, cleaned, and helped with chores in exchange for a bed in the barn. Day after day, she proved she was more than just a spoiled banker's daughter. She nursed a sick calf back to health, mended Ethan's torn shirts, and faced the harsh winds of the plains without complaint. Slowly, against his will, Ethan began to see her not as a burden, but as a presence he had needed for years. The nights were the hardest. The silence of the plains carried memories Ethan tried to bury, and Clara's gentle voice was often the only sound that eased his heart. One evening, as lantern light flickered between them in the small wooden cabin, she spoke the words that would change everything. Her eyes held both fear and determination as she whispered, "I'll have your baby." Ethan froze. He hadn't expected it. He had sworn never to build a family again, too afraid of the grief that had once crushed him. Yet Clara's words pierced the armor he had built around himself. She wasn't offering him escape, wealth, or safety. She was offering him a future, a chance at the family he had buried in sorrow. But more than that, she was offering him her heart in its most vulnerable form. That night, Ethan did not answer her. He walked out into the cool night air, the stars above him silent witnesses to his inner battle. He wanted to push her away, to protect himself from the pain he feared would come again. Yet deep down, he knew he had already fallen for her. Her laughter, her courage, her quiet defiance against the world. They had breathed life into a man who thought himself long dead inside. By morning, the decision was no longer just Ethan's to make. Word had spread in town of a young woman living with him. Clara's family had discovered her whereabouts and arrived in Clearwater, furious and determined to drag her back. With them came hired guns and influence that even the sheriff dared not ignore. They accused Ethan of taking her against her will, painting him as a criminal in the eyes of the town. The sheriff gave Ethan a choice: return Clara to her family peacefully, or face prison for abduction. Clara refused to leave. She stood beside Ethan, her voice trembling but firm, declaring that she had chosen him, not the life her father demanded. But her words carried little weight against her father's wealth and power. The sheriff warned Ethan that if he resisted, the law would come down hard on him, and Clara would be taken regardless of her wishes. That evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, Ethan made his decision. He could not lose her, not after she had rekindled the fire he thought was gone forever. He saddled his horse, lifted Clara onto it, and with determination blazing in his eyes, he rode out of Clearwater. The sound of hooves thundered across the plains as the law and Clara's family gathered men to pursue them. The chase was relentless. Dust rose behind them as they cut across canyons and rivers, desperate to escape. Clara held on tightly, her arms wrapped around Ethan, whispering that she trusted him no matter what. Every mile they rode bound them closer together, not just in love, but in defiance of a world that sought to tear them apart. In the towns they passed, whispers spread like wildfire. Some said Ethan had stolen her away. Others believed Clara had chosen her fate willingly. But none could deny the fire in her eyes when she clung to him, nor the fierce way he guarded her as though his very life depended on it. The legend of Ethan Carter and Clara Dawson was born that night, a story that would be told long after the dust had settled. For Ethan, the decision came at a heavy price. He was now a fugitive in the eyes of the law, a man hunted for a crime he did not commit. Yet for the first time in years, he did not feel alone. Clara's vow, "I'll have your baby," was more than a promise, it was a lifeline. Together, they would carve out a future far from the reach of those who sought to control them. And as they disappeared into the wild frontier, with only the stars as their witness, one truth echoed in Ethan's heart: he had chosen love over fear, and for that he would never look back. The moon hung low over the endless plains as Ethan and Clara rode deeper into the wilderness, their breaths heavy and hearts pounding. The sound of pursuit still echoed in the distance, the hired men of Clara's father refusing to give up the chase. Every hoofbeat against the dirt was a reminder that their love had come at a price. Yet Ethan did not falter. His arms held the reins steady, his jaw tight with resolve, while Clara clung to him with trust burning in her eyes. For the first time she felt free, not because they had escaped yet, but because she had chosen her own destiny. Days turned into weeks as they traveled further west, leaving the reach of Clearwater behind. They avoided towns where questions would be asked, choosing instead the solitude of the open land. Ethan knew the terrain well, guiding them through canyons, across rivers, and into valleys where few dared to tread. The journey was brutal. Food was scarce, the nights cold, and danger lurked in every shadow. Yet through the hardship, Clara never once asked to turn back. She cooked what little they had, tended to their horse, and found strength in the quiet moments when Ethan's hand brushed hers or when he whispered reassurances by the fire. Ethan, hardened by years of loss, was unaccustomed to sharing his soul. But as the nights grew longer, Clara became his confidant. He told her of Anna, the wife he had buried, and the child that never lived. His voice cracked as he admitted the guilt he carried, believing he was cursed to destroy any family he tried to build. Clara listened, tears brimming in her eyes, and when he fell silent, she laid her hand over his heart. "You are not cursed," she whispered. "You are a man who deserves love. I will give you that and more." The promise she had once made, "I'll have your baby," was not just a vow of children, but a declaration of unshakable devotion. Ethan began to believe her. Slowly, the walls he had built around himself crumbled. He found himself laughing again, smiling when Clara teased him, and dreaming of a life where the pain of the past did not overshadow the hope of tomorrow. But peace was not theirs yet. Clara's father had power, and his reach extended far beyond Clearwater. Posters bearing Ethan's name appeared in towns across the frontier, branding him a kidnapper. The law was on their heels, and every stranger's glance carried suspicion. Ethan and Clara lived like shadows, slipping from place to place, careful to never stay too long. At times, they crossed paths with outlaws and drifters who eyed Clara with ill intent, but Ethan's hand never strayed far from his revolver. He was not a man who sought violence, yet he would spill blood without hesitation to protect the woman who had chosen him. Months passed, and despite the fear and hardship, Clara found joy in the simple life they built on the run. She gathered wildflowers in the meadows, sang softly by the fire, and dreamed aloud of a little house where their children could play. Ethan listened, his heart torn between the harsh reality of their lives and the beauty of the vision she painted. One night, as they camped beneath the stars, Clara pressed a hand to Ethan's and told him what he had not dared to hope for. She was with child. For a moment the world fell still. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he looked into her eyes, realizing that her promise was becoming real. Fear and joy collided within him. He thought of Anna, of the pain of loss and the possibility that history could repeat itself. But Clara silenced his doubts with a smile. "This child will be our hope," she said softly. "We will give them a life worth living." The news strengthened Ethan's resolve. No longer was he running just for himself or for Clara. He was running for their family. He became more vigilant, more determined to carve out a safe place where they could live free from the reach of Clara's father. They traveled westward until they found an isolated valley hidden among mountains, fertile and untouched. There, Ethan built a small cabin with his own hands, cutting logs, laying stone, and shaping a home out of the wilderness. Clara, despite her growing belly, worked beside him, planting a garden, sewing curtains from scraps of cloth, and filling the cabin with warmth. For a while, they tasted peace. The valley seemed to protect them, a secret haven where the past could not find them. Ethan hunted game, Clara prepared meals, and together they built a life that felt almost ordinary. The laughter of anticipation filled their nights as they planned for the child who would soon arrive. Ethan found himself imagining little boots by the door, the sound of giggles in the cabin, and Clara's smile as she held their baby in her arms. But peace in the Wild West was always fragile. One afternoon, while Ethan was away hunting, a rider appeared at the cabin. Clara recognized him instantly. It was Sheriff Hayes from Clearwater, accompanied by 2 deputies. Her father's men had not given up after all. Panic surged in her chest as the sheriff explained that she had been reported taken against her will, that Ethan was a wanted man, and that they would take her back for her own safety. Clara, with fire in her eyes, declared the truth, that she had chosen Ethan, that she loved him, and that she was carrying his child. But the sheriff only shook his head. To him, the word of a banker carried more weight than the tears of a woman. When Ethan returned and saw the deputies outside his home, rage ignited in his chest. Guns were drawn, words shouted, and the valley that had been their sanctuary became a battlefield of choices. Ethan could have surrendered, gone quietly to prison, in the hope that Clara might someday be freed from her father's grasp. But Clara clutched his hand, her voice steady even as fear trembled within her. "Don't let them take me, Ethan. Don't let them take our child." The standoff ended in violence. Shots rang out across the valley, echoing through the mountains. Ethan fought with the desperation of a man who had everything to lose. When the smoke cleared, one deputy lay wounded. Another fled, and Sheriff Hayes, though alive, realized the truth he could not deny. Clara was not a prisoner. She was a woman in love, standing beside the man she had chosen. The law retreated that day, but the cost was clear. Ethan and Clara could never return to Clearwater, nor to any place touched by her father's influence. They were exiles, forced to live beyond the edges of society. Yet in that isolation, they found freedom. Their child was born months later, a healthy baby boy, with Clara's eyes and Ethan's strength. The cries of their son filled the cabin, turning it from a refuge into a home. Ethan held the child in his arms, tears streaming down his face as he whispered promises of protection, love, and a future carved from the wilderness. Clara, exhausted yet radiant, looked at him and smiled. "See," she whispered, "not cursed, blessed." Years passed and their love endured. Their valley remained hidden, their family grew. And though the world outside branded Ethan an outlaw, in Clara's eyes he was a hero. The townsfolk who once whispered gossip now told stories of the rancher who risked everything for love, of the woman who defied her family, and of the child born in a cabin built by hope. Ethan Carter's name became legend, not for crime but for devotion, and through it all, the words that had once changed his life echoed in his memory. "I'll have your baby." Clara had kept her vow, and in doing so had given him back his heart, his family and his future.